if you were raised as a perfectionist, you probably ended up a failure. Am I right? And I'm not necessarily talking about thinking that you're being a failure or just in your head while it's seemingly succeeding on the outside. I'm meaning falling short, wasting what seemed to be like great potential, and unable to figure out your life, and really going from what seemed to be the perfect poster child to the tortured, unable to get their life together adult. And why is that? What happened to your abilities, to your potential? You had everything going on for you. And in some way, you still think that you should have been doing more, but for some reason, you cannot. In this video, we're going to talk about why. Children of narcissistic parents are usually raised to turn themselves into perfectionists. And by perfectionist, I don't mean someone who does everything perfectly. I literally mean, when I say perfectionist, someone who never thinks that anything they do is good enough because they're chasing a level of perfection that doesn't exist, much like their parent forced them to do so that they can earn their parents' love. The perfectionist is driven by this instinct to constantly do things so perfectly in order to feel worthy, and is driven by a sense of shame that if they're not doing well in these things, then they are a failure themselves. As a person, they failed, which means that perfectionist ties up their performance to their sense of worth, and that is taught very early by their narcissistic parents, who approved of them or disapproved of them, accepted them or rejected them based on how they were succeeding, right? The poster children, the children who were gifted, the children who were doing good at something, ended up feeling tortured and to stay constantly in this sphere of being the perfect child, that a lot of them eventually retaliate and ruin their lives instead, because nobody can keep up with it. Because what happens is that internally, the more you succeed and the more you're acknowledged for what you succeed, the more you're reminded that nobody values you unless you succeed. So you're always, with every success, reminded that your worth and the love and the acceptance that you're getting are so conditional that you have to work so hard for them that eventually, you're like, you know what? I'm done trying so hard. Because no matter how hard you try, how many things you accomplish, how many things you do, eventually you will feel like it's not enough. So you just have to give up. So if you were raised with the burden of expectations, succeeding wasn't a byproduct of hard work, but a matter of securing a sense of worth that you eventually, as I said before, just stop pursuing. Eventually, you're like, you know what? I am unworthy. Why keep up with trying? And also, there's a finite energy internally to keep trying for something. Eventually, we give up. So children who are perfectionists and raised as perfectionists end up failing either internally, no matter how much they achieve, but a lot of them in every single way because they deny their own humanity so much. Children who are raised as perfectionists never heard, good things like, I'm proud of you for trying. It's okay to make mistakes. I love you no matter what. No. We always heard you could do better and that's not good enough, or the epic, why can't you be more like whoever perfect person is? And to which I want to say, if that person is so perfect, just why don't you obsess with them and leave me alone? Why do you like that? Go and obsess with them and make them even better. Whatever. But so you probably never heard a good thing in your life, and you probably never heard that you are valued and worthy as who you are. So those who raised you essentially did not allow for your humanness, your messiness, your ordinary self to be accepted and welcomed, and only saw, praised, and pushed you toward becoming someone, the one that always performed to perfection, and so the one that never learned that they were worthy unless they did so. So fundamentally, if we're raised as perfectionists by these parents, we are essentially learning that we're not good enough. And that should be the end of this video, but I should tell you more things because this is just a byproduct, right, of being raised by narcissistic parents. And a lot of people who had immigrant parents will relate to this. And people will say, it's because they're immigrants. They were within that, survival of you have to be perfect and I have to live through you. And we did all this for you to succeed. But there's also a lot of narcissistically sort of Is it not narcissistic when you birth a child, you give them everything and you want them to succeed in the things that you weren't able to do, in a way where if they don't, you're like, I did all these things for you to succeed and now you failed, and so my work has been futile and I shouldn't have done it. You didn't deserve me working hard for you if you didn't become a doctor or if you didn't become someone successful so that I can tell people that I did it, right? It's like they're tying essentially their worth to your achievements. Talk about pressure, so it's all about their image eventually, right? It's their image. It's painted as sacrifice, but it's really, they are going to capture a lot of that value per the image that you created for them in the world, because they did good and they created that. They did that. So is it really about you? I don't know. But anyway, how do narcissistic parents train you to become a perfectionist? Is not necessarily always like they tell you, I need you to be perfect. If you're not perfect, I don't love you. They don't really say it, or some of them may. I don't know. I don't know your parents. But usually how we're trained into perfectionism is happening in more insidious ways, right? And it really sort of starts with how we are, for example, being withheld love unless we perform, right? We are shown affection, we're shown praise, we're shown attention when we do well, when we did well at something, and it just vanishes when we fail or when we don't do anything. So that kind of happens, right? We see that these parents will micromanage everything. They pick apart our homework, our appearance, the way we speak. They just constantly want us to be perfect. Speak perfectly, act perfectly, dress perfectly, do this. It's almost like everything we do is being watched in a way where it's been evaluated, as if we just can't just exist and do something that's clumsy or just exist. Really. The other thing that narcissistic parents do to kind of like put us into the path of becoming perfectionists is that they shame our mistakes, right? Like we make a mistake and then it's just this big shaming event. And we never hear, you know what, it's okay. So you just made a mistake. It's like, no. You're not allowed because you're stupid or lazy, you're embarrassing them. And so you're learning that if I make mistakes, it's not what happens like, oh, I made the mistake. What do I feel about the mistake? Is what's my dad going to think? What's my mom going to think for that mistake? How is she going to feel about it? Am I embarrassing her? All of that, right? So you're feeling secondhand embarrassment for them because of the actions that you took and the mistakes that you did, because they're so attached to you and their whole self-image is now dependent on how perfect you appear to be in this world, right? You're the extension of themselves. What the other thing that they do to push you to perfectionism is they use comparison as a weapon. It's a cousin, a sibling, some other kids, some other magical kids that they never do things like that. And you live under the shadow of why can I be more like somebody else? Constantly compared to someone else. You're always compared to someone else. And it's really painful when we're compared. It's not inspiring. It's more like being told you're not good enough and they are. And so suddenly these people who may not even exist or may not be that perfect, or you may perceive them as somebody admirable, become the point of reference for your own worth. And it's just really bad and shameful to feel this way. And then that sort of leaks into your life when you just see everybody as a threat and you compare yourself to everybody because that's what you were taught to do. You don't know who you are unless you are comparing yourself with somebody who is less than you. That is quite narcissistic, unfortunately, but it's how you were trained. The other way, as I said before, that they turn you into a perfectionism is that you are the trophy. You're just a performance, really. When you succeed, they succeed. When you fail, they have to be ashamed for yourself, for shaming. They have to be ashamed because of your failure. And it's a lot of responsibility for a child. The stakes are too high to try and learn how to be human, to try and learn how to do things, and to be afraid that everything you do is going to have such a serious impact on your on your parents' fragile ego. You don't know that at the moment, but so how do we heal perfectionism? I think that I think that the choices are two, right? We're either going to choose to continue to down the path of trying to be perfect and achieve all these things and still feel inherently unworthy all our lives, trying to get and secure the recognition from these parents and their acceptance. Or we will give up and sink into our unworthiness, tired of chasing, trying to feel good enough and earning someone's love. But we don't do it as an act of rebellion in the sense of saying, you know what, it doesn't matter anymore, I feel good enough. It's more like there's no point, I'm worthless. And we sink into that unworthiness and not good enoughness. And then we leave out all of our skills and our gifts and our abilities and our strengths and our potential. And we go the other direction and we use none of it. Because we don't really have a middle ground. It's either chasing worth or assuming that we don't have any. Which is why a lot of you may have been raised as perfectionists or may have had like a path of doing great and then suddenly just collapsed into a failure, right? What feels like a failure, failing at everything. And almost feeling like punishing yourself for it because you had so much potential. Now, I want to tell you this. The potential exists, but chasing our worth through achieving becomes very addictive and a very abusive thing to do to ourselves. It's equally abusive as when it was done to us. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that sometimes our system will be like, you know what, I give up doing this. Because hopefully, if we fail bad enough and sit with failure long enough, but if we sit with failure long enough and feel it in our whole body until we think that it's us, us and failure is one thing, then we will see that feeling this way is not something that we can avoid anymore. And when we stop avoiding feeling like a failure because we don't produce anything, because we're not perfect, then maybe somewhere in those lines we will realize that it is ridiculous to equate our worth to our performance, to how well we do, to how perfect we are perceived. At the same time, there's a sense of maturity that shows up and says, I may not have to be perfect, but what if I aim being good enough so that I can make money, so that I can do this thing because I can do the other? And somewhere in that, end of that line, we may start walking or crawling our way or trying our way through a middle ground. We don't heal perfectionism by becoming so perfect that we finally feel good enough. And we don't heal perfectionism by getting those who denied us our humanness and denied us loving and accepting us in just being who we are. If we get their love and approval, that doesn't heal our perfectionism either. What heals our perfectionism is to allow ourselves to be imperfect, to embrace our humanness, to embrace being average, less than average, cringe, all the things. We embrace being human. And how do we do that? If you think about yourself as a child, or if you had a child that was you, and you're going through life, you're learning things, how do you teach that child that they can just exist and be loved, while at the same time teach them that they can keep trying to do good things? Meaning that they don't either have to just be lazy or do nothing and just sit around and, oh, I love you just the way you are, you don't have to do anything, versus chasing you to become perfect so that I can love you. How can I teach a child that their effort is more important than the result that they produce, but also that their worth is irrelevant by said effort or byproduct of that effort? So how do I teach a child that they're worthy, that I respect them and I love them? But also, how do I teach them that they have to keep trying and doing things? The way to do that is we let the child fail, and then we're good to them when they fail. And we paint all of these failed efforts as lessons, and that is okay. And we encourage them to keep trying, and we remind them that they're good enough for who they are, no matter what's happening or how much effort they're putting or how much they're succeeding. Basically, we heal perfectionism when we become the parent that we needed to ourselves, meaning we allow ourselves to navigate the world as if we're children, meaning we allow ourselves to navigate and show up in this world by learning and being seen in the process of learning and being seen making mistakes and being seen just being human. So we become a mentor and a parent and a guide, not a bully to ourselves. My invitation for this video is, what is that one thing that you've been wanting to try, or you feel like, if you're in this space of your life that it feels like I can't amount to anything, I'm not amounting to anything, nothing works, blah, blah, blah. At the same time, you have these humongous aspirations to become, I don't know, famous or something big that's like two worlds apart. You lack the skills, you lack the courage to make mistakes, you lack the bandwidth to allow yourself to fail, you lack the inner structure to allow for rejection or whatever, maybe to define you, to not allow it to define you. So there's a lot of things that you're lacking. This is the growth space. What is one thing that you can start working towards that is not so massive, that is like just out there, but it's a thing? And I actually talk about how to do that in my grow process in this video. I'm going to link it here. But what is that one thing that you can start teaching yourself how to do? My recommendation is also, you can start slow, like you can just learn a music instrument. Nothing more humbling than to learn a music instrument when you're older and you're not really musically sort of like very intelligent. You don't have a lot of knowledge. Or learning how to dance when you have to remember the choreography. Learning a skill that you are going to be failing at, and it's going to be in front of other people, be it your teacher or a whole class. What is the one thing that you can put yourself through, a process in which you can learn something you know nothing about and that you're probably bad at, and there's people around you looking at you while you're failing? And doing this process, if you commit to doing that, go to dance lessons for 3 months, just some random dance that is hard for you, or a musical instrument, as I said before. And as you're doing that, the way that you're going to show up is going to be the most crucial thing. Not how much you achieve or how better you get at this, but how well you treat yourself while it's doing this. This is going to be the moment where you can teach yourself how to heal out of perfectionism. If you're being good to yourself, respectful, patient, and loving, whilst completely failing at something, to like you're ridiculing yourself, failing at it, then that's how you will know that you have healed your perfectionism, because you deserve love, respect, and kindness at every expression of your life, but specifically and most importantly, when you're struggling. And at the same time, that shouldn't deter you from trying and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations where you're growing, because you have to grow, right? Just like, oh, I love you so much, just be you, and then sit at home in a messy house, eating leftovers for days after days, and like just, not. I think we struggle with the unconditionality in terms of how we can learn how to simultaneously accept and value ourselves for where we are, and at the same time help ourselves do better. And that's okay. While it's never losing touch with the fact that we are lovable and worthy just for where we are, without that meaning that we won't go further, we won't try harder, but with also that not meaning that we can never rest. So that's how you heal perfectionism. Go get a hobby, a random hobby, at something you're really bad at. Fail publicly. Oh, even what's going to humble you a lot what's going to teach you not to be a perfectionist, get on social media. Record yourself on social media. That is intense, putting yourself out there in such a way. But it doesn't have to be that big of a leap for those of you who don't feel comfortable in just doing that, or maybe you're not interested in doing that. But yeah, show up and show up imperfect. But how you show up to yourself is going to be what's going to change. Not how well you do at this task, how you show up because you're not doing good at this task is going to be the changing moment. I'll see you soon.